Hello everyone, and thank you for choosing to watch this video from the Bookcase Online Presents. And today we are truly privileged to be joined by Kadiatu Kanneh-Mason, author of this wonderful book, House of Music, Raising the Kanneh-Masons. I can't recommend this book highly enough as an informative and entertaining read, and as an amazing insight to an extraordinary family life. But to tell us more, I'm delighted to welcome Kadiatu, or Kadi, to the Bookcase. Welcome, Kadi.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I'm so pleased that your book begins with a family history. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that, both yours and Stuart's?
Well, when I wrote the book, I thought it was just going to be about Stuart and me bringing up the children, then realised none of it would make sense unless I went right back to my childhood and my husband's childhood. So I was born in Sierra Leone. My father was Sierra Leonean, my mother Welsh. They met in Birmingham. She went back to Sierra Leone and married him and had 4 children. When I was 4, unfortunately, he died. So my mother brought us back to Britain. Or not back to Britain, it was back to Britain for her, but to Britain for the first time for us. We lived in England for 4 years and then Wales for 4 years. And that's my background.
And have the children ever managed to go to Sierra Leone yet? Because I know you yourself couldn't go back because of civil war and you know, the various things that happened with that.
Yes, we still haven't gone back. We were meant to go back next year. All plans were in place. We were going to do a concert this year and then go back next year. But of course, COVID-19 happened, so it's going to be delayed for a bit longer, but definitely it'd be lovely to go back and take
Absolutely. Quite a brave thing to do at that time, not only to enter into a mixed race marriage, but also to go off to Sierra Leone as well.
Yes, incredibly brave. I think they were together in Birmingham for a few years before going to Sierra Leone, and being in Birmingham in the early 60s as a mixed race couple was incredibly brave, and they had to run the gamut of a lot of comments and issues, but of course going to what was then seen as a very remote, which was actually very cut off from Britain, to go to West Africa and start a married life, incredibly brave thing to do.
And I think that bravery, courage and strength is possibly what's enabled you to be the person you are, and the children to live the lives they're living too. It's all relevant, isn't it, really?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And what about Stuart's background then?
So Stuart's parents were immigrants from Antigua in the late 1950s. He was born in the 1960s, he and his sister, and he grew up in London.
And I know both of them, and you too. I mean, these 7 children haven't arrived just as perfect sort of musical geniuses straight away. You both had very good musical training in the background, didn't you? And were both very able players of... For you, it was piano, wasn't it?
Yeah, piano and clarinet.
Clarinet,
for me,
yes.
And piano and cello for Stuart.
Yes.
So we were very lucky because I grew up in Wales at a time when you could have free music lessons at the school. There was a big orchestra, there was a big band in the primary school, and music was very much part of everybody's education. And my mother sacrificed enough to give me piano lessons as well. So I was brought up with music, and the same with Stuart. He had free music lessons in London at the time, and it was recognised as something that was valuable.
Yeah, and yet I know I read in one bit that for his mother, for Enid, he was regarded by one of his teachers as not capable of being in mainstream education, and then shortly afterwards she had to admit that he was actually the brightest boy in the class. So
yes, exactly.
Again, it's been quite a difficult start in many ways, but as I suspect a lot of the strength that's enabled you to do all you have done has come from those beginnings in so many ways. You wrote very movingly of your father's death. That must have been very difficult to process at that age.
Yes, it was, and I think it was something that was not really talked about when I was young. It was seen as something that it was best not to tell children about, not to bring up as a subject. Very different times, and so I think it was something that all us children kept inside for a long time.
And from what you've said about him, I think he'd have revelled in your family life now, wouldn't he?
Yes, he would have been incredibly proud and loved every minute.
Yes. And the grandparents have played a part anyway, haven't they, in the children's practices and all the rest of it, being alongside and listened and encouraged.
Yes, we've definitely not done it all ourselves. It's been an extended family project, certainly.
Fantastic. Now, moving on to when you and Stuart met, I believe that was at Southampton University?
Yes, it was.
What were you both studying?
So I was studying English and Stuart was studying physics. So we were poles apart in that sense.
And tell us a little bit about your first impressions of him.
Yes, we were poles apart in terms of personality as well. We didn't hit it off straight away. I thought he was a pompous Londoner and he thought I was a villager and not of any interest.
Gosh.
So we rubbed each other up the wrong way.
And all these years later, you've got the partnership to prove that it can work, which is fantastic. And I gather he asked you to marry him quite early on.
Yes, he did, yes. I think we'd known each other for about a year at that point. And I said no. I thought it was ridiculous. But he persisted and asked me again 9 years later. So
brilliant.
In the end, he won.
Absolutely. And so after you were married, quite soon you were pregnant with Isata, weren't you?
Yes.
And not an easy pregnancy.
None of them were easy pregnancies.
That takes courage too, then, I have to say, to keep going with that sort of thing. But you went back to work after Isata was born, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And yet you'd found it really quite debilitating. So what's your memory of that time?
I think it's actually quite important that mothers do go back to work, because when you have children you do have a massive loss of identity, and it's very difficult. So I was very determined to go back to work. But of course it is also a very difficult thing to do because you're pulled in two different directions. And then when I had more children I found it very difficult because my husband was working away so much. So I never quite intended to stop working, but I ended up not going back. It was more circumstantial.
Yes. And then Brymer was next, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after Brymer was born, was it, that you went to Bahrain?
That's right, because Stuart was offered a job at Gulf Air, and I thought, well, this might be a good time to go, actually, because I was commuting to Birmingham University from Nottingham, falling asleep at the wheel, and I thought perhaps it was a good time to take a break.
But little Isata was quite troubled by it all, wasn't she, with Daddy going first and then the move, so tell us a little bit about that, and that's that period.
I think small children understand far more than adults often give them credit for. So she knew that there was huge disruption around her and it affected her emotionally. And I think that was something that I understood from my own childhood, so I recognised it. And it was only when we were completely settled in Bahrain that she calmed down and stopped seeing strange visions and acting very strangely. It was incredibly disruptive.
I think music played a part in that, didn't it?
Yes, music was a huge settling thing for her, I think.
Very healing.
Yes, and it was healing, but it was also somewhere where she could... I suppose, occupied her imagination and took her creative intelligence somewhere.
Yes, and brought her earlier vitality back, sort of channeled that intelligence into something that clearly has become such a part of her as well, so that must have been absolutely ideal. And then next on the scene, Sheku and Konya. So you had 4 very young children then, and again probably felt a bit of a loss of your own identity at that point. I think you also felt the tug of homesickness then, didn't you?
Yeah.
So it was back to Nottingham?
It was back to Nottingham, yes.
I say back to Nottingham. Were you in Nottingham before you went? Or?
Yes, Isata was born in Nottingham.
That's right, yes. I forget the details, yes. So while you were back in Nottingham, you bought a piano so that Isata began playing at about the age of about 6, is it?
That's right, yes.
Yes. And clearly took to it like a duck to water.
Absolutely, yes.
And also, I know you're very keen to say how fortunate the children were to go to Walter Hall's school and to the the Trinity Roman Catholic School.
Yes.
Because their music there was really developed and encouraged.
Yes, they had amazing head teachers who thought music should be right at the centre of the curriculum, encouraged, children should be praised for playing music, given opportunities to play, and both the schools I think were fantastic for that.
And that's something that I think sadly is becoming more and more distant now, isn't it?
Yes, there's not the budget for it. I think it's more than just budget. I think there's a cultural attitude that's changing.
Yes.
So music is something that's not valued anymore.
And yet it does so much. I mean, it creates team building. It can, as I say, the way it soothed little Isata when you moved to Bahrain even, I think, there is so much good that it can do. But sadly that's not recognised. I don't know how that's ever going to change though, do you?
I hope it does. I think we have to be positive because creative intelligence is something that's important in all subjects.
Absolutely.
And in all walks of life. So I do hope that the wheel turns again.
I've got to say, I think even the success of your own children will probably help with that. It will be something that those that are keen to encourage music in school will be able to look and say, you know, look what happened when you've got children like this, and give them those opportunities to at least start. I know that the opportunities came thick and fast from the work you and Stuart and all their wonderful teachers have put into it sort of externally as well. But, you know, to let a child like that slip through your hands would be criminal, wouldn't it? Really?
I hope so. I hope they become ambassadors for something that's possible.
Yeah.
But in time.
Yes. Now, little Isater went to the Royal Academy of Music in London. At what age? How old
she was 9 when she auditioned,
yes,
and 10 when she actually started.
Right. And how did you prepare her for that audition? It probably seemed like a big deal at the time.
It was a huge deal because I wasn't sure that she was going to be good enough, because
yes,
the audition is a very tough thing to go through, and of course you don't know. But she worked so hard, and we did lots of listening to music, lots of listening to YouTube actually,
yes,
to prepare her, and it worked. So, but
yes,
it was down to her hard work and her passion and commitment to going.
And I gather at the age of 10 she wrote a piano concerto.
She did, yes. Yes.
Well, how was that received? Because I know you said Stuart actually took it to an orchestra to be played. So how was it received?
It was wonderful. We had a really big audience, and it was just wonderful because she played the concerto as well, a piano concerto.
Wow.
And she'd memorised the whole thing, and she played with such love and excitement. I think it took the whole orchestra with her. It was fantastic.
It fascinates me how professional musicians do memorise music. I can't memorise 2 bars of music, you know, and so to see people just go, and given the repertoire they have as well, all that stuff in their brain, it amazes me, absolutely. And then, of course, the 3 oldest at the ages of 11, 9 and 8 started composing string quartets and piano trios. And do any of them or all of them still compose?
They do when they have time. The problem is if you have a performance career, it's very difficult to fit it in. So they do a lot of arranging still together, and some composing as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's wonderful. When they arrange music, is it fairly organic? Are they there with instruments at hand and it just kind of comes together? Or is it a paper exercise, or more correctly these days, of course, a computer exercise, isn't it, on the Sibelius?
Yes. It's a bit of both.
Yes.
So with the latest thing they did, they arranged a medley of songs from Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes.
That started with Shaker and Ister in Italy, actually, on Sibelius, composing the skeleton. Then they all came together and all chipped in. So it was very organically grown from that.
Yeah. And are there any sort of slight disagreements then as to, hang on a minute, you know, you've had the lead in this all the way through, and what about my turn? Or again, is it? I know they are very supportive of each other. So does it just sort of flow quite naturally?
It does flow quite naturally. There is lively discussion.
Good. You'd expect
that. So they all have something to say, and then they discuss things, and things might change. But no, not disagreement as such, no.
Now, when they play together, just to hear their phrasing, when there's rubato, it just seems so natural. It just works, and it's absolutely effortless. No conductor required, but is there a natural leader amongst them?
I think there probably is. I think it's Brymer.
Right.
Because he very much gathers them all together and disciplines them all. So I think it's probably him, because otherwise they'd have the 7 soloists all going off on their own ideas. You
know, that's the wonderful thing about your children. That despite their phenomenal ability to play, their wonderful gift in music, there doesn't seem to be any real ego there. They all seem to sort of slot in and be part of the whole, don't they? Which is really quite special, I think. I'm very impressed by that. And it's lovely to see the pianists accompanying the violinist, the cellist within the family. Now, obviously, living in the same home and sharing the same DNA, I would imagine that's a big advantage. But how do they feel when they're playing with someone else, either the accompanists or the soloists?
That's an interesting point. They find it much easier to play with each other because there's so much that just doesn't need to be said. They already know what everybody thinks and feels, and they tend to agree. So, but they have learnt how to discuss things and negotiate, and so they do play with other people quite a lot. Sometimes it's with a mixture of siblings and other people. And so, but what they have learnt from playing together is the importance of chamber music and sharing and discussion. So I think that having to put their egos aside makes it easier to play with everybody.
Brilliant, wonderful. Would you like to read a passage now from the book for us, Caddy? You choose something that you feel would I'd like other people to get a chance to hear some of your wonderful writing, because I've been so taken with the book. I really have.
Thank you. Well, I thought I would choose something which shows how hectic it was when they were younger and how we managed those evenings of music practice. So, the evenings were carefully mapped out at an early stage. After the voracious mealtime, there was reading and writing, and everyone had a music session on the piano or on their stringed instrument. The boys would often practice their remarkable gymnastics in the hallway while waiting their turn, while I sat breastfeeding and listening to one of the girls at their instrument. Night after night, in the relentless after-school routine, I sat with each of the children in turn, listening and helping them with their music practice. Stuart would also be sitting with children in turn if he were home in time after work and not working abroad. When Stuart approached a piece of music, he loved the drama of the big picture, while I was forensic about the notes, the timing and the dynamics, which had to be clean and accurate. I made sure each child didn't smudge a running passage with blundered notes or crash through a phrase that was meant to be quiet. But I was also tired. It was a condition so constant, it was simply a fact of life. I thought for a while quite seriously that perhaps I had developed narcolepsy, because every time I sat down in a waiting room, in the opticians with one of the children, or even at the steering wheel, I would drop off. But there was no time to consult a doctor. Even the thought of sitting in a chair in the surgery sent me to sleep.
Oh gosh, difficult times, but you have come through it, I say, looking quite remarkable at the end of all that anyway. Now, Shaker was famously the first black musician to be awarded the coveted and prestigious BBC Young Musician of the Year award. But he's not the only member of the family that's competed, is he?
No, so Isata was also in the piano category final, and so was Jennifer.
Brilliant. So they got to the end of the finals there. Do they feel slightly that, you know, they haven't sort of done quite as well as Shaku because they didn't get all the way through? But I mean, to get to the finals is phenomenal, isn't it, in a competition of that?
Yes, and actually with Isata, she got to the category final, yes, and it was a huge shock and disappointment when she didn't win. But then she used that to help Shaku 2 years later when he entered, because she accompanied him. So actually with the children, everything that doesn't quite go right is part of a longer journey. It's
lovely actually to be able to view things that way. I'm sure it's very, very good for the children to have that sort of background as well, you know. So, and then of course there was the royal wedding, which was another big one for Shaku. Tell us about your emotions and his, and how he coped with all the publicity and the pressure.
It's very interesting because with publicity and pressure, it's not something that comes into the home and into the family. So I think the very fact that when they're together, they are just each other. No one ever has airs or graces, or would be allowed to anyway, because they would just be, it just wouldn't work within the family. So I think as soon as the doors are shut, no one even thinks about those things. So the pressure isn't really there, and no one takes it seriously. So
I mean, that really is quite incredible, you know, when you think that he was playing to literally billions of people around the world, and to just go in there and do that, absolutely phenomenal. And I'm always amazed and impressed at the maturity that all your youngsters exhibit when they're interviewed. I mean, musical performances are what they live for, in a way, isn't it?
Yes.
That is their life now.
Absolutely.
But being interviewed at such a young age for so many of them, and you know, I'm sure that they're asked everything from the inane to the profound to the absolutely unanswerable. Have you given them any coaching in that, or have they just picked up from the way you and Stuart are when people put you in that position?
No, we've given them no coaching. I think it's just happened over the years. They've just always just been completely honest, and never acted and just said what they thought, which is always the best way to be.
Absolutely, and the charm that comes from them is fantastic, you know, and that is because they're being so normal and natural, I suppose, and very modest. So that's really good for them, isn't it? Now, sadly, racism is something that has intruded into your lives, and there have been occasions where it's been particularly personal and has created barriers for you. I saw the video that you and the family put together after the horrendous killing of George Floyd. Incredibly moving, I have to say. I think some of the things that happen are out of ignorance, but so much more goes way beyond that, doesn't it? Now, as a family, I think you're presenting such a positive image to the world, and one that comes across as totally authentic. So you and your children have your own black heroes, don't you?
Yes, we do.
So who do you look up to?
So, of course, the main one for Sheku is Bob Marley.
Bob Marley, of course, yes.
And Muhammad Ali was a big hero. So lots of sporting heroes, heroes within music. They've always listened to lots of reggae and rap and R&B and all kinds of African music, Caribbean music. So lots of heroes in music, but also sport.
So do you feel there's still a lot more that you and the family can do, apart from just be yourselves and present this?
I think the first and foremost for the children, it's the music.
Yes.
That is their mission in life, and that's what they love and that's what they do. But of course they take very seriously the responsibility of helping other people. So Sheku always says, well, I've opened the door as the first black musician to win BBC Young Musician. I can't be the only one. I have to leave the door open to others after me. There has to be a sense that this world is going to change and others will come in. So I think they do both things. They see the music as the first thing, but of course they recognise their position as role models as well.
Yes. Which is quite a responsibility at the age they are, actually. I mean, so far they all seem to be handling it all incredibly well, but it is asking a lot, I think, of young people of their age, really. Now, their musical lives, it would be pointless to try and list all their amazing qualifications and, grades and distinctions and all the rest of it that they've managed to get. But the success they've achieved is not just because they're technically brilliant, is it? It's very much about the interpretive way they present their music. I mean, there's that wonderful quote, which I will read from here, that from Hilary, who was Jacqueline du Pre's sister, and she says, Jackie says that so many cellists can play technically well, but can they make music? Sheku is the first cellist since Jackie who has that natural, vibrant abandonment when playing. That must have been a wonderful thing to hear.
Absolutely amazing, because Jacqueline du Pre is one of Sheku's heroes.
Absolutely.
So, yes. And always, we were, as a family, it was never about just, you can play your scales really well. It has to be about the music and the feeling and the emotion and the communication as well. Yes,
that's something else I know you say in the book about the wit and humour that passes between the children when they're playing together. Yes. And equally, I'm sure some of that sort of empathy and just the whole feeling of it just goes between them all, doesn't it? Which is fabulous. What of their achievements means most to them?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think it's probably certain concerts they've played where they felt that they've connected with the audience. It's never something like a particular prize or something like that, although those are wonderful. It's particular moments and concerts and times when they felt that the music really worked. But I couldn't tell you what those were. There's so many.
Well, there will be so many, and of course, and it will be different for each of them. And as the catalogue of their performances and everything else goes on, I would imagine they will just continue to increase, won't they? So, anyway, we've talked about Isata a little bit and Sheku, but what about Brymer and his time with Clean Bandit? That was a very different type of music, wasn't it?
It was. So that came just after Sheku won BBC Young Musician, actually, and Brymer started at the Royal Academy of Music as a violinist. And then he was suddenly playing in this band, travelling all around the world at the same time as trying to study. But he absolutely loved it. He had a wonderful time at the ages of 18 and 19, travelling the world, going on all these tours, playing this music. Fabulous. But when he came to his second year, he realised it's actually very difficult to balance those two things. But he loved every minute.
Well, isn't that wonderful? And it's so lovely because, I mean, all of you say you love music. Yes. I think I heard a quote from, Andrew Lloyd Webber saying, there aren't different types of music, there's good music and bad music, basically,
Absolutely.
And I think there's a lot of sense in that, isn't there? Yeah. Now, Kanneh, very accomplished pianist. I saw Kanneh actually play at the Albert Hall in Nottingham when she just won the male voice choir prize that year. Yes, was it 2 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago,
wasn't it? Yes.
It goes quickly.
Now, you describe Kanneh as a very contented baby, but quite a stubborn little toddler. So which of those characteristics has she brought into adulthood?
Oh, absolutely both. The stubbornness is the way that she will absolutely go for a goal and never swerve. She's incredible, incredibly committed. So she works very, very hard, and she has a very clear vision about what she wants. but she's still very sunny, very smiley, very lovely.
And I gather she can repair things?
Oh, she's amazing.
She's the one that's, oh yes.
And still has that gift. If I can't do something, I just pass it on to Kanneh, and I don't know what that is.
Every family needs one like that.
They do.
We haven't got one. Fabulous. And she likes to write as well. Is it Kanneh that likes to write? Yes.
She does. She writes all the time.
So following in Mum's footsteps, perhaps?
Yes, maybe, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think each of them will have their niche. So it'll be interesting to see.
And particularly, I mean, the fact that you've chronicled this part of their lives and your life is so important because, you know, even in 10 years' time, some of the waters will be muddied and it'll be hard to remember what's what. So for you to, I hope you'll write more in the future, but perhaps Kanneh will too.
I think Kanneh
different
definitely
perspective
will.
of it. So, and tell us a little bit about Jennifer, cellist and pianist.
Yes. Now it's interesting because each of them has a very different playing personality, and Jennifer's playing personality is incredibly comes from inside. She's very introverted when she plays, and so not introverted, that's the wrong word. Everything comes from very deep within.
Right.
It's very emotional, and I think that's probably where her strength lies.
Do you know, I was going to say to you, if two of your children, say two of the pianists or two of the cellists, were playing something in a room, and it was the same piece of music, would you be able to tell just from the interpretation which one it was?
Yes, absolutely. They'd be completely different.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
And again, that's what gives them the edge, I think, as you know, wonderfully capable performing musicians, which is superb. And I gather Jennifer likes Rachmaninoff.
Oh, she liked that from the age of probably 1.5 or something like that.
Gosh.
Yes. Loves Rachmaninoff.
I mean, I know most of what they play will be incredibly technically difficult, but of course Rachmaninoff is renowned for having this massive handspan, isn't he?
Well, Jennifer has massive hands.
She's just as well, isn't it? You know, if she's going to read, play those sort of things. And what about Aminata? She's studying violin and piano.
Yes, now she's
Already
a dramatic one.
Yes.
Yes, and she's very keen on drama.
Yes.
So I'm wondering which way she's going to go. And when she plays, it's a very dramatic thing, and everything about her is dramatic.
Will it help, you know, with all the music though, will it give her time to sort of pursue possibly an acting career if that's the way she wanted to go?
Yes, well what's interesting of course, it's all performance. It's all performance on stage.
Yes.
So I think it all feeds in with each other, yes.
Fantastic. Then Mariatu, baby of the family. She's already an accomplished cellist with ambitions to be even better than Sheku.
Absolutely.
Very keen to practice. I've heard her in interviews saying that, you know, she knows that's what it's all about, doesn't she? Which is fantastic. But that sort of brings me on to the physicality of playing, whether it's a stringed instrument or the piano. A lot of strength required, isn't there?
Oh yes, I think you have to have a lot of endurance as well.
Yes.
Because if you're going to do hours of practice, you have to develop those muscles.
Yes.
And you have to also deal with tiredness. And of course, concerts, when they were happening, of course, were late at night. So you have to be able to stay up late at night, you have to be able to cope with all of that. But she's learning that very early.
Which, yes, and for a child as young as she is, that can't be easy at all, can it? Going back to the strength that's needed, and clearly playing a stringed instrument or the piano, presumably, there's always that danger of RSI, isn't there, a repetitive strain. And do you think playing two instruments is probably something that's quite helpful in that?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think if you're playing one instrument, it's always the same muscles and the same tension.
Exactly.
If you go back and forth between two, it kind of opens you up in a different way. But even if you're just playing one, you should never be doing the same thing over and over again too much. You've got to move between different styles of playing or different exercises. Very important. And also different forms of exercise. You can't just play the piano and then not exercise. You also have to walk or do a kind of sport or
well, that core
something
strength
like
must
that.
be very important for playing piano or the stringed instruments.
Yoga, anything like that. Yes.
Yeah, very important to them. Now, Sheku famously plays the 400-year-old Amati cello, which is on permanent loan to him. But do any of the other siblings have access to instruments of similar calibre?
Yes, Brian was very lucky to borrow a violin from the Beers Violin Society, a beautiful old violin. And of course, Aminata also borrows an instrument from the Royal Academy of Music because she's in the Junior Royal Academy. And the pianist, Isata, is a member of the Steinway Society, so she's able to go and play Steinways at their Steinway shop. And Jennifer, of course, is able to go to the Royal College of Music and Kanneh, the Royal Academy, to play the pianos there. So it's fantastic.
That's wonderful. It really, when you think about the average sort of upright in anybody's home, you know, it'd be so different to play something like that. Now, to produce instruments of such high quality always seems to me to be quite amazing. And you cite the generosity of people in loaning those instruments to the children to take home. But what a thrill it must be to have your instrument played by somebody of the talent and you know, the gifts that your children have to bring to them. So I would think, you know, to be able to loan an instrument that you own to somebody as capable as your children must be quite a treat. But you'd also talked about Frank White.
Yes.
Yes. Now, Frank, in your words, was a builder, plumber and carpenter.
Yes, amazing.
Who created a string quartet in his retirement. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, he just did it because he loved instruments. He loved string instruments, and he was very capable in making things. And so when he retired, he decided he was going to make a string quartet. Amazing. He went on a course, learned how to do it, and made these beautiful instruments, and then was incredibly kind, loaning them to the family, which is an amazing thing to do.
Gosh, I'm just sort of knocked sideways by people's incredible talent in doing things like that. Now, something that I think is very close to your hearts as a family is the China K Orchestra. And Nwanaku, that's it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, what happened was, when was it, 2015, the children were approached by her to join the orchestra, and they were going to have the inaugural concert in September 2015. And amazingly, it was Eyster, Brymer and Sheku all played in that concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, South Bank. An unbelievable occasion. So when that orchestra walked out on stage, it was like something had changed.
Yes. Now, a lot of people won't understand why, when they walked out, something had changed. So tell us a little bit more about the China K Orchestra.
So China K Orchestra is a majority Black and Asian orchestra, and it's there to address the lack of diversity in orchestras and classical musicians. Because normally if you go to a concert hall, it's very difficult to find other Black and Asian musicians, or even within the audience. And so the orchestra was there to address that. So it was an orchestra of Black musicians.
Now, the next exciting project on the horizon is on the 6th of November, your family releasing a CD in which all 7 are playing, and they're going to be joined by the wonderful Michael Moore-Pergo and Olivia Coleman. Tell us about that one.
That's really exciting. Now, that was actually arranged before lockdown. It was going to happen, but then lockdown in some ways, obviously lockdown was not a gift in many ways for classical musicians, but for us, for the album, it was fantastic because suddenly they had all that time to practice together and really get into everything in the album. Because what we were worried about was how on earth are they going to have time to get this album together, but then they suddenly had lots of time. And it's amazing. It's the first album they've done all together.
Fabulous.
All 7 of them, and they absolutely love it.
Can't wait.
Yes, they really love it.
Did they collaborate with other musicians though? Because clearly there's a lot of percussion and wind and all sorts of things, isn't there? And because if you'd like to tell us what the main music is on there.
Yes, so it's Carnival of the Animals. Yes. So of course you need the marimba. Yes. You even need a glass harmonica. You need It's flute, clarinet, double bass. So they did have wonderful musicians, who they know. It was their friends really who they invited to play. Fantastic musicians, and they also did a Michael Moore-Pergo's book Grandpa Christmas. That's just the 7 of them playing musical interludes with that.
I can't wait.
It's fantastic.
That's going to be absolutely wonderful. Both the CD and of course Caddy's book are available at the Bookcase. You'll be able to find details on our website, which is thebookcase.co.uk. So, Caddy, you've told this story quite beautifully in these pages, and you and your family have certainly found a place in the hearts of the music-loving public, as well as as opening up a world of different genres of music to some people who may have considered it inaccessible before. My thanks to those of you who have watched this video, and I hope you've enjoyed hearing directly from Caddy the trials and tribulations, as well as the joys and triumphs of raising the Kanneh-Masons. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to hear future videos. And to close, I'm going to ask Caddy to read a section from her book. So Caddy, over to you, please.
So I'm going to read right at the end of the book, the last chapter, which is Memories. At the end of the next day, Easter Sunday, we found a moment to sit outside. We had finished the Easter egg hunt, the same as it had always been, with shouts and intense excitement, everyone running up and down the stairs, rummaging through beds, table drawers and toy boxes, laundry baskets and clothes, in a frenzy of noise and joy. Now, children and their cousins were playing a very loud board game inside the house. The sun was gentle in late April and still warm on the garden. It was me, my mother, sister and brother, talking quietly at the end of the day, and everything was the same.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. Thank you. It's been an absolute joy and delight to hear you, and a privilege. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.